Well, NATO now says they will fast track Ukraine's membership process by skipping one of the two application steps. This doesn't necessarily mean Ukraine will be admitted to NATO soon, but it significantly moves up the timeline. The process to be skipped is called MAP, or Membership Action Plan. It's more or less a checklist of what NATO wants from a member state. Sweden, Norway, Finland, they also are applying for NATO, but they don't get to skip this step. Practically, this means that NATO and the US will step into leadership roles in Ukraine's war effort because this establishes a new Ukraine NATO Council. The first meeting will be held tomorrow, Wednesday, and will be attended by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who had previously threatened not to show up if he was not given significant promises to gain entrance into NATO. Now, joining me to discuss what this means and if it is, in fact, an escalation for the war is Alexandre Guerrero. He's a political scientist and commentator. You can follow him on his Portuguese language YouTube channel with his name. It does have subtitles if you don't speak Portuguese. Here to break this down in English is Alexandre Guerrero. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to join you today, Natalie. So I'm very pleased and very honored to be here today.
Yes, well, the pleasure's all mine. Now, I have been watching your YouTube channel partly to practice my Portuguese and also because I appreciate your analysis. You have been warning about a NATO escalation, and one of your recent shows, you said that NATO is acting here as a war propaganda machine. Is that what this move is? This, I guess, branch out to Ukraine?
It is indeed. So on one side, they give with one hand and then they take with the other. But the main problem is that NATO actually seeks to put more pressure on Russia because on the battleground, they actually are unable to defeat Russia, at least even with the so-called counteroffensive. And the more weaponry that they provide to Ukraine and the more technical support they also provide to Ukraine, it's not getting any good results for this counteroffensive or even to put pressure on Russia. But when we look at this approach towards Ukraine and the proximity that they want in order to bring Ukraine to NATO, it seems unrealistic to me that Ukraine will ever manage to meet the minimum conditions to be a member of NATO in the near future or even in the medium term, because from a technical legal point of view, if we look at the requirements established in 1995 NATO enlargement study, we quickly realize that Ukraine does not have the minimum conditions to guarantee the stability and security of the Euro-Atlantic zone. It cannot contribute militarily to the alliance. It is not a democracy. It fails to guarantee a good neighborly environment. It has also a critical record of violations against minorities' rights, and it does not even have its borders defined. Yet, we don't even know what Ukraine is or what it will be within 6 months. So at this moment, I don't believe this is kind of realistic. However, it works as a propaganda in order to put more political and as well as some social pressure towards Russia in order to bring a negative idea related with Russia and to force people not to accept any kind of truce or any kind of agreement with Russia.
It seems a bit like a face saving move as well, because Ukraine had been saying, look, we're not going to show up to your party if we don't get some kind of agreement. But then today, a spokesperson for Ukraine said, oh, this fulfills our requirement. We can show up now. It seemed to me to be an empty threat. They were always going to show up for the camera. Do you agree with that?
Of course, because Ukraine actually don't have any place else or anyone else to help them. They need NATO support because without NATO support or without the Western support, they will lose this war within 1, 2, 3 days because they need this permanent support provided by NATO every day. So, and if they don't show up to the cameras, if people don't see them asking and demanding for more weapons, for more money, for more efforts towards the fight against Russia, they will quickly fade in terms of public opinion. So people will easily start to forget and to look at Ukraine as a second option. So they need NATO because they don't have any other resource solution. They only have NATO and the West.
Now, you said in a recent episode that Turkey's President Erdogan made a brilliant move in supporting Sweden by laying out conditions for Ukraine to enter NATO. Can you explain that and whether or not that still is true based on these symbolic moves today?
Yes, I believe so, because Recep Tayyip Erdogan has ever been showing that his kind of politics and geopolitics usually are inspired by some kind of tactic, according to which he saves some cards, some big cards in his sleeves. So, and where anytime he needs to show them, he wins the game, because people are not expecting Erdogan to make this kind of moves. No one was expecting until yesterday that Erdogan would ever request to join the European Union like he did yesterday, because even during all his speeches and public statements, he said at least since 2016 that the European Union was already a project or an ambition that he already forgot. It wasn't not on Turkey's plans and intentions to become a EU state member. However, we must look at his masterpiece of geopolitics yesterday, because he demanded that Turkey must join the European Union in the future. He never said when or how. Maybe because he is not expecting actually and realistically to join the European Union. However, he is requesting and he demands something that he demands, and that's very important not only to Erdogan but also to Turkey, is to develop the relationship between European Union and Turkey regarding the customs union, as well as the visa waiver program that the Turkey always have dreamed about, but they never had from Europe. So if he can at least get this, I think that it would be seen as a half victory for Erdogan, but on a Western perspective. But for Turkey, this will be seen as a huge victory. So, and at the same time, he was able to give some arguments also to the West and to the world as a whole, that Turkey is no longer seen as a society that is seen as a brutalized society, an underdeveloped society, like it has been seen over the years. There are two reasons why Turkey has always failed to meet the minimum requirements to join the EU. The first was the religious aspect, and then it was also the cultural aspect. And from this moment, what Erdogan got, because also Charles Michel came to the public saying that he would do everything he could to help Turkey to join the European Union, what Erdogan got with this was Turkey now is one of the developed countries like we are here in the West. So this is a huge diplomatic victory for Erdogan.
Now, one of the things about the fact that Ukraine may get this sort of council, but not formal membership, does seem to feel like NATO member countries will still be dragged into the conflict more than they wanted. Even if this is a symbolic move, it does up the ante. So if you live in a member NATO state like you and I do you think that means then that the countries that we live in will be further dragged into the conflict?
It will, because the European Union and the Western countries don't have any other option. They got into this with Ukraine. They continued to go deeper with Ukraine, and now they don't have a way out. The only way they have to get out and leave Ukraine alone is by making some kind of agreement or concession to Russia, and then leave Ukraine without an option rather than to celebrate an agreement, a peace agreement with Russia. So I believe that now Europe and the West have come to a point, have they reached the point where they must invest everything they have and wait and pray for Russia to commit some kind of mistake, huge mistake that could cost a lot to the Russian effort in Ukraine. I don't see how the West can move out from this kind of hybrid and proxy war with Russia.
I'm so curious though how that this is sold to European countries, because here in Portugal, like in other EU countries, we see the economy hurting as a result of this war. We see protests in the street from Portuguese people who can't make ends meet because of this. But it still doesn't seem like it equates to an appetite for peace or peace plans, because the media continues to be on Ukraine's side. So, how do you think the people of Europe will continue to be sold this war as economies implode?
I believe that at first it was easier to sell this war effort, this need to go to war with Russia, at least in the beginning of the conflict. But now it's getting more and more harder for the Western authorities to justify that we must keep on this, keeping this effort against Russia. Because, for example, even a couple of weeks ago, I saw that on Eurobarometer, the Portuguese have lost their power of purchase of nearly 80% in certain goods for every day. 80% of loss
Yeah.
is a huge loss. It's not only in Portugal, this actually, but people don't read these stats. People only answer these stats. And for example, in many EU countries like Portugal, people don't know how to organize and how to go to the streets and put some pressure on the government. We are not like Germany, we are not like the Netherlands, where people go to the streets, or France, and they demand, they seek some political solution and some change in the policies. However, what I have been hearing more and more, and the time is passing, is more and more people that are not resumed to silence. People now are starting to lose their fear and to demand publicly, not only on social media, but even in casual talks and conversations with their friends on the streets. They demand for the Europe and the West to get into peace terms with Russia, because this is not sustainable. So this narrative that presently Russia is the boogeyman and we must do everything that we can in order to defeat Russia, I don't think it will pay off within some months, because people are feeling the pressure of inflation, of the loss of power purchase. So I believe that with time, people won't be able to support this anymore.
Yeah, a lot of times, when we're in Lisbon, I point to the statue that's over the river and I say that statue represents the fact that Portugal stayed out of World War II and that peace is a natural national virtue. It doesn't feel like we're going to get another one, but I hope we do. So this has been neutrality has been a Portuguese virtue since World War II. So hopefully that peace appetite is something that will continue to spread throughout Europe because that's what we stand for too. So thank you for joining me today to break this down. I really appreciate it. I hope you come back again. You can find Alexandra on Twitter. It's AT Guerrero, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
as
it.
well as his YouTube channel, Alexandre Guerrero. And if you don't speak Portuguese, you do have the option of subtitles. So I do recommend his channel very much. So thank you again, and please come back on Redacted some other time.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.